Your fish rushes to every feeding. It eats, finishes, looks satisfied, but something is slowly, quietly going wrong, and you won't notice it for months, maybe ever, because the wrong food doesn't do anything dramatic right away. The liver gradually accumulates fat. The immune system quietly drops. Color fades at a pace too slow to notice. Growth stalls. And while you're wondering, water parameters are normal, why did it get sick? The answer is written right there on the container you open every single day. That's what we're covering today. Which fish eats what it shouldn't eat, and what the wrong food does, invisibly, slowly. And at the end of the video, you'll see a breakdown. You'll look at your own fish and ask yourself, am I actually doing this right? Chances are, the answer will surprise you. That red container on the shelf. Tropical fish food. Colorful fish on the label. You buy it. You give it to all your fish. They all eat it. Seems fine. But tropical fish food isn't a nutritional guide. It's a marketing category. What's inside varies dramatically from brand to brand, formula to formula, and the protein percentage, carbohydrate balance, and animal versus plant content in that container. All of it means something completely different for different species. For a Pleco, too much animal protein slowly breaks down the liver over time. For an Oscar, insufficient protein stunts growth. For a Corydoras, surface food is simply inaccessible. It dissolves and disperses in the water, and nothing meaningful ever reaches the bottom. Same container, 3 different fish, 3 different outcomes, and they were all eating. A fish eating something does not mean it's digesting it. Carnivorous fish have short digestive tracts, optimized to break down protein quickly. When starch and carbohydrates arrive, the system isn't prepared. Amylase enzyme production is insufficient. Glucose processing capacity is limited. What happens when a carnivorous fish is fed a high carbohydrate diet? Blood sugar spikes and can't come back down. The liver converts the excess energy into fat. Over time, fat accumulates in the liver. Fish develop fatty liver disease just like humans do. Research has clearly shown that high-starch diets cause histological liver damage in carnivorous fish. The reverse is equally true. Fish adapted to plant-based diets have long digestive tracts. They ferment and break down plant matter. When high animal protein arrives, the system processes it too quickly. The kidneys get overloaded. Long-term kidney damage follows. In both cases, the fish is eating. In both cases, nothing looks wrong on the surface. But inside, the clock is ticking. The Corydoras is at the bottom of the tank. Calm, curious, looks happy. You drop food at the surface. The other fish eat. The Corydoras waits. By the time partially dissolved food particles reach the bottom, what's left? Most likely a residue with little to no nutritional value remaining. This scenario plays out every day, and the Corydoras is slowly undernourished. Growth slows, immunity drops, its barbels thin out, both a visual and physiological warning sign. For the Pleco, the situation is even more specific. In the wild, Plecos eat algae, biofilm, and decaying wood. Their natural diet is largely plant-based, and wood isn't just decoration. The cellulose in wood is essential for the bacteria living in their digestive system. In a tank without driftwood, the Pleco loses its gut flora. Then you add standard tropical food on top of that, heavy on animal protein. The Pleco eats it because it's hungry, but that food isn't right for it. Over time, it weakens, color fades, growth stalls, and you say, Plecos just don't move much. No, the Pleco is sick. This is something most people never think about. Protein is good, that's true, but for which fish? How much? And when? For herbivorous and omnivorous fish, high animal protein overloads the kidneys. Protein metabolism runs through the kidneys. When that load is consistently elevated, kidney tissue deteriorates over time. This is chronic damage that builds across years. You can't see it from the outside. Test kits don't measure it, but the fish's lifespan is shortening. On the other side, feeding carnivorous fish a low-protein diet creates a different kind of damage. Oscars, bettas, large cichlids, these fish need high protein. With insufficient protein, their growth stalls. Muscle tissue can't develop. The immune system weakens. Disease finds its opening. And the best way to understand this is to ask one question. What does this fish eat in the wild? An Oscar hunts insects and small fish from the riverbed. A Corydoras forages for microorganisms in the mud. A Pleco scrapes biofilm off rock surfaces. The answer to that question is the answer to what you should be feeding. Your fish's color isn't quite as vivid as it used to be. A little washed out. Maybe it's the lighting, you say. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's the food. Color pigmentation is directly tied to diet. In foods with insufficient carotenoid content, fish color gradually fades over time. This is especially pronounced in red and orange pigments, making a visible difference in color-intensive species like discus, cichlids, and koi. Growth works the same way. Without the right nutritional profile, skeletal development slows. An incorrect calcium to phosphorus ratio affects bone structure, and these effects can't always be reversed. Damage that happens early can become permanent. Reproduction is the last thing to be affected, but the most serious consequence. Females that are poorly nourished produce lower quality eggs. Males show reduced reproductive activity. The answer to why aren't they breeding is usually found not in water chemistry, but in the feeding chart. But now we've reached the most unexpected point on this list. Live food is the best option. People say this often, and it's largely true. But there's one exception, and it's a serious one: bloodworms. The treat food most hobbyists reach for. Fish love them. They eat them eagerly. But bloodworms are high in animal protein and place a heavy load on the digestive system. When fed frequently, especially to herbivorous or omnivorous fish, they can trigger intestinal inflammation. Bloat shows up for this very reason. In Malawi cichlids in particular, frequent bloodworm feeding can lead to fatal outcomes. Tubifex worms carry a different risk. In the wild, they live in polluted water. Contaminated sources carry both bacteria and parasites. Freezing doesn't eliminate this risk entirely. Good intentions, wrong food. Same result. And here's a question that now really matters. So what should each fish actually be eating? These are the general categories, but every species has its own profile. Betta, carnivore, needs high animal protein. Pellets, frozen daphnia, brine shrimp. Plant-heavy foods cause digestive problems. Bloodworms occasionally and in small amounts only. Corydoras, omnivore but a bottom feeder. Sinking tablets or pellets are essential. It can't get adequate nutrition from food that disperses at the surface. Spirulina-based sinking tablets plus small frozen foods are ideal. Pleco, primarily plant-based. Vegetables like zucchini, cucumber, and spinach should be offered. For many Pleco species, driftwood supports digestive behavior and natural feeding instincts. High animal protein foods should not be given. Oscar, carnivore, large appetite. High protein, large pellets, or stick foods. If feeder fish are used, they should never go in without quarantine. Disease risk is significant. Goldfish, omnivore but with a cold water metabolism. Fed at the same volume and frequency as tropical fish, overfeeding is guaranteed. Low protein, high plant content, food formulated for cooler water. Discus, omnivore but with a sensitive digestive system. Beef heart was the standard recommendation for many years. Today, a more balanced, dedicated discus pellet is preferred. The long-term effects of beef heart on the liver remain a subject of debate. Neon tetras and small tetras, omnivore. Micro pellets or fine flake food. Their mouths are small. Larger food particles physically can't be taken in. Simple, but frequently overlooked. Your fish rushes to every feeding. But that's no longer enough for you to feel confident. Because between eating and eating correctly, there can be months, sometimes years of difference. And the consequences of that gap, faded color, slowed growth, weakened immunity, shortened lifespan, come slowly. They come invisibly. Now look at your own fish. Which category does it fall into? What is it eating? Is it a bottom feeder or a surface feeder? Carnivore or herbivore? The answers to these questions are in your hands, and knowing them can genuinely change that fish's life. What were you feeding your fish before? And what do you think you'll change after this video? Write it in the comments. In the next video, we'll talk about when and how often to feed, how many times a day, how much, at what time, and we'll finally settle the question of, fish always look hungry. If you don't want to miss it, you know what to do. See you under the water.